The first time Santa came to our street, it was December 4th. Not during the day, when kids lined up in malls and grocery stores to sit on his knee and whisper wishes. He came at night, long after the houses had gone quiet, when the only sounds were furnaces clicking on and off and snow ticking against windows. He knocked softly, 3 polite taps, patient, almost gentle. Mrs. Calder from across the street answered the door. We know because she told everyone the next morning, laughing nervously as if it were a joke she didn't quite get. He said he was just verifying behavior records, she said, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. Can you imagine? Some kind of prank, I guess. Santa had stood on her porch in a perfectly pressed red suit, beard immaculate, boots black and shining. No sack, no bells, just a leather-bound ledger tucked under one arm. He knew her husband's name, her children's birthdays, the argument she'd had with her sister 10 years ago and never spoken of again. He said it was all on file, she told us. I didn't even know what to say. After he left, their cat went missing. More visits followed. Always after midnight. Always polite. Always alone. Santa came to the Morgans' house and mentioned the money hidden in a shoebox under the guest bed. He visited the Patel family and recited the exact words Mr. Patel had used the night he almost walked out on them. He showed up at the rectory and stayed inside with Father Keene for nearly an hour. Each time something disappeared. A dog, a framed wedding photo, a page torn cleanly from a diary. Small things at first. Personal things. By December 10th, people stopped laughing. By December 15th, they stopped answering the door. But that didn't stop him from knocking. He came to my house on December 17th. I was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of cold tea, listening to the snowstorm swallow the street. My wife, Marissa, was asleep upstairs. The kids, too. 3 taps. I didn't move. The knocking came again, softer this time, as if not to disturb the neighbors. I know you're home, a voice said gently through the door, warm, cheerful, practiced. I just need a moment. I should have stayed silent. Instead, I went to the door. Santa stood there exactly as described. Red suit, white trim, rosy cheeks. But his eyes were wrong, too sharp, too focused, like a man doing inventory. Good evening, he said. I'm here to verify your behavior records. I didn't ask for this, I said. No one ever does, he replied pleasantly. He opened his ledger without being invited. You've been mostly good, he said, flipping pages that didn't move like paper should. But there are discrepancies. My mouth went dry. He looked at me. Do you remember the summer of 2009? I did. You left. Santa continued smiling. For 3 weeks. You told Marissa it was for work. I felt dizzy. You came back, he said, and she never asked. That counts as kindness. But the lie still exists. I started. You don't need to explain, Santa said kindly. I already know. He closed the ledger. I'll just be taking something small. Before I could stop him, he reached past me and plucked something from the hallway table. My father's photograph. Gone. Santa tipped his hat. Merry Christmas. He was already walking away when I found my voice. What happens to the houses? I asked. He paused. The ones that fail verification? He said. They finish emptying themselves. By December 20th, the police were overwhelmed. Entire families were vanishing overnight. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Houses left exactly as they were. Lights off, doors locked, meals half prepared, pets missing, photos missing, names scratched out of family Bibles so deeply the paper tore. On our street, the Calder's house went dark first, then the Morgans, then the rectory. The town began boarding windows, sitting in silence after dark, turning off porch lights. As if not being seen might help. It didn't. Santa knocked anyway. Christmas Eve arrived under a dead, heavy sky. The town was almost silent. No carolers, no church bells, no lights. Marissa wanted to leave. "We should go," she whispered. "Tonight." But the roads were already closed. Snowbanks taller than cars, no signal, no way out. At 12:03 a.m., the knocking came again. 3 taps. This time it was louder. "Final verification," Santa called. The kids stirred upstairs. I opened the door. Santa looked pleased to see me. "You didn't replace what I took," he said mildly. "You never said I could," I snapped. He smiled wider. "You're not supposed to." He stepped inside without asking. The air grew colder where he passed. "Records show you're incomplete," he said, consulting his ledger. "Memories missing, guilt retained. That imbalance isn't acceptable." "What do you want?" Marissa asked, her voice trembling. Santa looked at her with something like pity. "Completion," he said. He reached into his coat. I expected a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a list. Names filled the page. Ours were already crossed out. "The good ones are remembered," Santa said. "The rest are sorted." The lights flickered. Upstairs, the kids began to cry. Santa sighed. "This part is always messy." They found our house on Christmas morning, or what was left of it. The door was locked, the snow undisturbed. No sign of struggle. Inside, the rooms were empty. No furniture, no photos, no clothing. Just a Christmas tree standing in the living room. Lights still plugged in, but unlit. Under it sat 4 neatly wrapped boxes. Each box contained something small. A wedding ring. A child's shoe. A torn photograph with the faces scratched out. And on the fireplace mantel, a leather-bound ledger lay open. The final entry read, "Verification complete. The town was declared uninhabitable by spring. They blamed gas leaks, mold, structural damage. But every December, people driving past swear they see a red figure walking door to door in the empty streets, knocking softly, patiently, carrying a book full of names, still checking his list, still making sure no one is forgotten." We bought the tree because it was easy. That was the lie we told ourselves, that it would save time, save mess, save effort. No needles to vacuum, no sap on the floor, no hauling a dead thing out to the curb in January. Just a pre-lit artificial tree from a warehouse store on the edge of town, boxed and labeled Evergreen Classic, guaranteed lifetime use. It smelled faintly of plastic and pine cleaner when we opened it. The branches snapped into place with satisfying clicks. The lights worked on the first try. Perfect. The first night it turned on by itself, I assumed it was a timer. 3:33 a.m. The lights flared to life all at once, white and steady, bright enough to bleed up the stairwell and paint the hallway ceiling. I woke with the uneasy feeling of being watched and lay there listening to the house hum. "Did you leave the tree on?" I whispered to my wife, Mara. She murmured something and rolled over. I went downstairs and unplugged it. The lights stayed on for a full second after I pulled the cord. Then they went dark. I told myself it was a capacitor discharging. Electricity does strange things, cheap decorations especially. The tree stood there quietly, ornaments unmoving, branches perfectly symmetrical. Nothing wrong at all. The second night it happened again, 3:33 a.m. on the dot. This time, the lights pulsed, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. When I reached the living room, I stopped short. The ornaments had moved, not fallen, rearranged. Glass balls that had been scattered randomly now formed a loose spiral winding up the trunk. Candy canes hung in pairs, crossed like bones. The angel topper leaned slightly forward, wings bent inward. Mara stood behind me, clutching her robe. "You did this?" "No," I said. Our son Caleb padded down the stairs, rubbing his eyes. "Why's the tree on?" "Go back to bed," Mara said quickly. Caleb stared at the tree too long. His mouth hung open. "It looks sharper," he said. I laughed too loudly. "It's plastic." But when I brushed my hand against a branch, the needles pricked my skin. Not enough to bleed, but enough to hurt. By morning, the ornaments were back the way we'd left them. The branches felt soft again. The tree was inert and harmless, lights dead unless plugged in. We didn't talk about it. That night, sap dripped onto the hardwood floor. It came from the tree. Thick, amber drops oozed from between the plastic needles, sticky and fragrant. Pine, real pine. It glued our socks to the floor and left stains we couldn't scrub out. At 3:33 a.m., the lights turned on. The ornament spelled a word, Caleb. Each letter formed by carefully placed glass bulbs, their reflections warping his name into something distorted and crawling. Caleb stood at the edge of the stairs, staring down. "How does it know my name?" he asked. "It doesn't," I said. "It's just coincidence." The tree clicked softly, like wood expanding in heat. Sap dripped faster. That night, I unplugged it, wrapped the cord in duct tape, and stuffed it behind the entertainment center. At 3:33 a.m., the lights came on anyway. This time, the shapes were faces, dozens of them, pressed outward from the branches as if the needles were a thin skin stretched over bone. Mouths open in soundless singing. Eyes formed from clusters of LEDs that flickered and dimmed as they watched us. Mara screamed. I grabbed an axe from the garage. The blade bounced off the trunk like I'd struck rubber. The tree swayed. Something inside it shifted. By December 24th, the house smelled like a forest after rain. Wet earth, rot, sap. The tree shed no needles, but the branches looked longer, heavier, bending under their own weight. The ceiling above it bulged slightly, as if pressed from below. We tried to drag it outside. The stand was fused to the floor. The trunk was warm. At 3:33 a.m., the lights didn't just turn on. They brightened. Every bulb flared at once, casting jagged shadows that crawled along the walls. The ornaments rearranged themselves in a blur of motion we couldn't quite track, settling into symbols that made my eyes ache to look at. Circles within triangles, knots without ends, shapes that felt older than language. The sap pooled around the base, steaming faintly. Then came the sound. Footsteps, not around the tree, inside it. Slow, deliberate. The hollow thud of something pacing within the trunk, brushing against the inside of the bark. No, not bark, but something pretending to be. Caleb sobbed. "It's waking up." "No," Mara whispered. "It's growing." The footsteps matched the rhythm of the lights. Step, glow, step, glow. On Christmas morning, the ceiling was gone. Not broken, not collapsed, just displaced. The tree extended upward through the living room ceiling, through the second floor, branches splitting walls apart cleanly, like they'd always belonged there. Its trunk filled the space where our house had been, thick as an oak, pulsing faintly beneath its surface. The angel topper was gone. In its place, a hollow opened near the top, just wide enough to breathe from. Footsteps circled inside. We stood at the base, dwarfed, insignificant. The tree's lights glowed softly now, warm and inviting. Ornaments hung low enough to touch. One of them was a photo frame. Inside was a picture of our family, us smiling in front of the tree last year. But the faces were wrong, stretched, rooted together at the edges. Another ornament showed a name carved into wood, not Caleb's, mine. The footsteps stopped. The trunk split with a wet, fibrous sound, opening like a door. Warm air poured out, smelling of sap and breath. Something inside inhaled, and I understood. This wasn't a decoration. It was a house. A thing that grew where families gathered, fed on memory and warmth, learned the shape of celebration and hollowed it out. A thing that didn't need to be cut down because it wanted to be invited in. The footsteps resumed, closer now, circling faster. Mara squeezed my hand. "What does it want?" "To finish decorating," I said. The lights flared. The ornaments rattled. And somewhere deep inside the trunk, something laughed, slow and satisfied, as it made room for us among the branches. After all, Christmas trees aren't meant to stand alone. They're meant to be filled. The first time I heard the tune, I thought it was a radio left on somewhere. It was early December in Bramble Hollow, the kind of town where Christmas arrived gently. Paper snowflakes in windows, wreaths on lampposts, the smell of pine and wood smoke settling into everything. I was washing dishes when the melody drifted through the open kitchen window. Soft, lilting, unmistakably seasonal, yet unfamiliar. Not Silent Night, not Joy to the World. Something slower, older. It made my hands still in the sink. Outside, my daughter Lily sat on the front steps with a few neighborhood kids, boots kicking idly against the porch. They were humming in unison. I leaned out the window. "Lily?" She looked up, smiling. "Yeah? What are you humming?" She tilted her head, as if surprised by the question. "The Christmas song." "Which one?" "The one we learned at assembly," she said, like that explained everything. By the end of the week, half the town's children were humming it. Always after sunset, never during the day. I noticed it first during evening walks, groups of kids wandering the sidewalks, breath fogging the air, the same melody threading between them. No lyrics, just humming, low and steady, like a lullaby stretched too thin. Parents began asking questions. At the school office, the secretary frowned and flipped through schedules. "There hasn't been a Christmas assembly yet," she said. "Not until next week." When pressed, the teachers all said the same thing. No new song, no unfamiliar carol, no assembly after dark. The kids insisted otherwise. "It was in the gym," Lily told me that night, swinging her legs from the couch. "The lights were dim. They told us to listen." "Told you who?" She shrugged. "Just them." Her humming started again without her realizing it. I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Lily," I said sharply. "Stop!" She blinked, confused, and the sound cut off. I didn't know I was doing it. The tune began to change the town. Dogs whimpered after dark, tails tucked, refusing to go outside. The church bells rang one night without anyone pulling the rope. The old McKenna house, abandoned since the 70s, had lights on in the windows, glowing faintly like candles. And always, after sunset, the humming. I recorded it once on my phone, standing on the porch at night while Lily slept upstairs. The sound drifted through the cold air, carried from block to block. When I played it back the next morning, the recording was empty. No sound at all. By December 20th, the kids stopped humming in groups. They hummed alone. Lily would sit at the kitchen table, pencil moving across paper, the tune threading through her breath. If I spoke, it faltered. If I touched her shoulder, it stopped entirely, like a broken spell. "What happens in the song?" I asked her gently one night. She frowned, as if trying to remember something slippery. "It's not a song," she said. "It's a call." My heart stuttered. "A call to what?" "To come listen," she whispered. On December 23rd, the power went out just after sunset. Not just our house, the entire town. Darkness settled over Bramble Hollow, thick and absolute, broken only by the moon reflecting off fresh snow. Candles flickered to life in windows. People stepped onto porches, calling to neighbors. And then the carol rose, louder than I'd ever heard it, not humming anymore. Singing. Still no words, just layered voices, dozens of them, overlapping and echoing, drifting through the streets like fog. The sound didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere at once, vibrating in my chest, rattling my teeth. Lily sat bolt upright in bed. "It's starting," she said calmly. "What's starting?" I demanded, pulling her into my arms. She looked past me toward the window. "They're here to finish it." Outside, doors opened. Children stepped into the snow, barefoot, pajama-clad, faces slack and peaceful. Parents shouted, grabbing coats, chasing after them. I wrapped Lily in a blanket and rushed outside. The kids were walking toward the town square, toward the old school. The building loomed at the end of the street, dark except for the gymnasium windows, glowing faintly from within. The doors stood wide open, snow drifting across the threshold. The singing poured out, deafening now. Inside, the gym was full, not just of children. They stood in rows, heads tilted upward, eyes unfocused. And behind them, around them, were shapes that didn't belong. Tall, thin silhouettes pressed close, their outlines wavering like heat mirages. They leaned down, mouths close to the children's ears, singing through them. That's when I understood. The voices weren't the children's at all. They were instruments. The things behind them lifted their heads as we entered, attention shifting like a tide. The singing swelled. Lily wriggled in my arms, humming along, her voice blending seamlessly with the others. "No!" I whispered, clutching her tighter. "You don't belong to them!" One of the shapes stepped forward. Its face was a blur of shadow, but its eyes shone like frost. "This is how we stay remembered," it said. "Not with words, but with sound." The carol bent around the meaning. "Once a year, when the dark is longest." I covered Lily's ears and screamed her name. For a moment, the singing wavered. The lights flickered. Parents surged forward, dragging children away, shouting, crying. The sound fractured, losing harmony. The shapes recoiled, outlines fraying like torn fabric. The carol broke. A sound like ice cracking filled the gym, sharp and final. The lights went out. Morning came cold and quiet. The power was back. The school stood empty. No sign of the night before. No footprints, no open doors, no record of an assembly that never happened. The children remember nothing. Lily woke with a headache and asked why she was wearing pajamas under her coat. The town tried to move on. We always do. But sometimes when the sun sets early and the air turns sharp, I hear it again. Very faint. Just at the edge of hearing. A melody without words. waiting for December.